If you think the day Jesus was crucified was a quiet, solemn religious gathering, you have been lied to. Jerusalem in 33 AD was a terrifying, blood-soaked powder keg on the absolute brink of mass slaughter. The city normally holds 80,000 people. But this week, over 500,000 pilgrims have flooded through the gates. The Romans have locked down the streets. The high priests are extorting millions of dollars from the poorest families in Israel. And in a matter of hours, the execution of one man is going to plunge the entire city into 3 hours of supernatural darkness. Let's drop you right into the dirt, the smell, and the terror of life in Jerusalem on the exact weekend of the cross. You step through the gates of Jerusalem during Passover week, and the first thing that hits you is not the beauty of the temple. It's the noise, the deafening, relentless, industrial roar of death. First-century historians record that during the Passover season, upwards of 250,000 lambs could be slaughtered in a matter of hours inside the temple courts. Picture that for a moment. Not thousands, not tens of thousands. 250,000 animals, bleating, screaming, dying. The stone floor of the inner court is slick with blood. The Levitical priests work in rotating shifts, their white robes stained red up to the elbows. They move like factory workers on an assembly line, slitting throats, draining blood into bronze basins, passing the carcasses down the line to be skinned and butchered. The air is thick with the stench of copper and burning fat. The smoke from the altar of burnt offering rises in a black column that can be seen for miles outside the city. This is not a peaceful sanctuary. This is an industrial slaughterhouse operating at maximum capacity. The scale of this operation is almost impossible to comprehend. Every Jewish family is required by the law of Moses to sacrifice a lamb for Passover. And with over 500,000 pilgrims flooding into Jerusalem from across the Roman Empire, from Egypt, from Babylon, from Asia Minor, the demand is staggering. The priests work in shifts around the clock. The knives never stop. The blood never stops flowing. And the blood doesn't just pool on the temple floor. It drains. The engineers of the Second Temple built an underground channel called the blood conduit. It runs beneath the altar, beneath the court of the priests, and down through the retaining wall into the Kidron Valley below. During Passover week, the Kidron River outside the city runs completely red. Pilgrims walking along the eastern wall can see it, smell it. The entire valley reeks of death. The water is thick with blood and refuse. And this is considered normal. This is what Passover looks like in 33 AD. But the slaughter itself is not the most disturbing part of this system. The corruption is. Because the temple in 33 AD is not run by godly men serving the Lord. It is run by a mafia. The high priest at this time is a man named Caiaphas. He serves at the pleasure of his father-in-law, Annas. And Annas is one of the wealthiest, most powerful men in the entire Roman Empire. He controls a network of market stalls inside the temple courts, called the Bazaars of Annas. These are not ordinary markets. They are a protection racket designed to extract maximum profit from the poorest pilgrims in Israel. Here's how it works. Every Jewish family is required by the law of Moses to bring a lamb for Passover sacrifice. But the animal has to be inspected and approved by the temple authorities before it can be offered. If you bring your own lamb from Galilee or Judea, the inspectors will almost certainly find something wrong with it. A blemish on the wool, a spot on the skin, some minor technicality that disqualifies it from being an acceptable offering. Your lamb is rejected. So what do? You are forced to buy an approved lamb from the Bazaars of Annas at 5 to 10 times the normal market price. A lamb that you could purchase for 2 denarii in the markets outside the city will cost you 10 denarii inside the temple courts. And you have no choice. The law requires a sacrifice. The inspectors have rejected your animal, so you pay the extortionate price, and the money flows directly into the pockets of Annas and his family. But it gets worse. You also have to pay the temple tax, half a shekel for every adult male. But you can't pay it with Roman coins, because Roman coins bear the image of Caesar, and the second commandment forbids graven images in the house of God. So you have to exchange your Roman denarii for Tyrian shekels, which are considered ritually clean because they don't bear human images. The money changers inside the temple courts will gladly make that exchange for you, for a fee, a massive extortionate fee that can add up to 20 or 30% of the total value. This system generates staggering wealth. Scholars estimate that the temple economy during Passover week is pulling in the ancient equivalent of tens of millions of dollars. And it is all flowing into the pockets of Annas, Caiaphas, and the Sadducee priestly aristocracy.
The
They are not
exchange rate
servants of
favors us
God.
again today.
They are billionaire gangsters wearing
Another
holy
excellent
robes.
day for the temple.
And the poorest families in Israel, the widows and the laborers and the farmers who have saved for months just to make the pilgrimage to Jerusalem, are being bled dry to fund their empire. And everyone knows it. The entire system is rigged. The pilgrims know it. The priests know it. Even the Romans know it. But no one can do anything about it, because the high priests control access to the most sacred space in Judaism. They hold the keys to the temple. They decide who is clean and who is unclean. They decide whose offering is acceptable and whose is rejected. They have built a religious monopoly, and they are extracting every shekel they can from it. Jesus walked into this system 3 days ago. He overturned the tables of the money changers. He drove out the sellers of sacrificial animals with a whip made of cords. He called the temple a den of robbers, and the men who run this billion-dollar operation have been planning his execution ever since. But the smell of blood from the temple is not the most terrifying part of 33 AD. The real terror is hidden inside the cloaks of the people standing right next to you. The streets of Jerusalem are packed, shoulder to shoulder, body to body. You can barely move. The narrow alleys of the lower city are so crowded that you are literally pressed against strangers on all sides. And every single person in this crowd is afraid. Because this city is not just a religious festival, it is an occupied war zone, and the two most violent forces in the ancient world are about to collide. On one side, you have the Romans. On the other, you have the rebels. And caught in between are 500,000 terrified pilgrims who have no idea which side is going to kill them first. The rebels are everywhere. They blend into the crowd. They look like ordinary pilgrims. They dress like you. They talk like you. But beneath their cloaks, they carry short daggers called psyche. They are the exact type of violent insurrectionists who will later become known to history as the terrifying Sicarii. But in 33 AD, they don't yet have that organized name. They are simply known as zealots, revolutionaries, assassins, and they operate with brutal efficiency. Their tactic is devastatingly simple. They wait until the crowd is at its thickest, usually during the afternoon when pilgrims are streaming toward the temple for the evening sacrifice. Then they step up behind a target, a Roman collaborator, a tax collector working for Herod, a wealthy Sadducee priest, and they drive the blade upward into his ribs, straight into the heart or the lungs. The victim collapses. The assassin drops the dagger into the dirt and melts back into the crowd. By the time anyone realizes what happened, The killer is already 50 feet away, just another face in a sea of 500,000 people. And it is happening constantly, multiple times a day. Bodies are found in the alleys. Blood pools in the gutters. The Romans conduct brutal crackdowns, arresting anyone who looks suspicious, torturing suspects in the dungeons beneath the fortress Antonia. But the killings don't stop. Because for every zealot the Romans capture and crucify, 3 more take his place. In fact, on the very week Jesus is crucified, a violent riot has just been suppressed by the Romans. A man named Barabbas, a known insurrectionist and murderer, is sitting in a cell waiting for execution. The Gospel of Mark records this plainly. Barabbas had been part of an uprising. He had committed murder during the rebellion. The streets are still stained with blood from the crackdown. The city is still on edge from the violence. The Romans are furious. The pilgrims are terrified. And the zealots are still out there, blending into the crowd, waiting for the next opportunity to strike. So how do the Romans respond? With overwhelming, brutal force. Towering over the Temple Mount is a structure called the Fortress Antonia. It is a massive military installation, 105 feet high, built on a rocky platform at the northwest corner of the temple courts. The fortress has 4 towers, one at each corner, with the tallest tower rising even higher to give Roman soldiers a commanding view of the entire city. From the top of those towers, Roman archers and spearmen have a direct line of sight into the most sacred space in Judaism. They can see everything: the court of the Gentiles, the court of women, the steps leading up to the holy place, even the altar itself. The message is clear: Rome is watching, always. During Passover week, the Romans flood the fortress with reinforcements. Thousands of legionaries are brought in from the coastal garrison at Caesarea. They are stationed on the rooftops with spears and bows, scanning the crowd below for any sign of trouble. Undercover soldiers are sent into the streets dressed as Jewish pilgrims, carrying hidden daggers, ready to strike at the first hint of rebellion. The governor, Pontius Pilate, has temporarily moved his headquarters from the coastal palace in Caesarea to Jerusalem specifically to oversee the security operation. He knows that if this city erupts into a full-scale riot during Passover, with 500,000 Jews packed into the streets, it could spark an uprising that spreads across the entire province. And if that happens, Rome will hold him personally responsible. His career will be over. His life might be over. So, the atmosphere in the streets is suffocating. You walk through the narrow alleys of the lower city, and you can feel the paranoia pressing down on you like a physical weight. You don't know if the man standing next to you at the market is a zealot with a dagger hidden beneath his cloak. You don't know if the Roman soldier watching from the rooftop of the fortress has orders to shoot arrows into the crowd at the first sign of unrest. You don't know if the person you just bumped into in the street is an undercover agent working for the high priests, ready to report your words to the authorities. You don't know if you're going to make it through this week alive. In 33 AD, you could be stabbed by a zealot for being accused of collaborating with Rome. Or you could be arrested by the Romans, tortured, and crucified for looking like a zealot sympathizer. There was no safe side. There was no neutral position. There was only survival. And into this powder keg walks Jesus of Nazareth, a man the crowds are calling the King of the Jews, a man who rode into Jerusalem 5 days ago on a donkey, while thousands of pilgrims waved palm branches and shouted, "Hosanna!" A man the Romans see as a clear political threat, because anyone claiming to be the King of the Jews is claiming authority that belongs to Caesar. A man the Sadducees see as a direct attack on their billion-dollar temple empire, because he publicly called them thieves and overturned their market stalls, and a man the Zealots desperately hoped would lead a military revolution against Rome, because the prophets said the Messiah would crush the enemies of Israel. He satisfies none of them. He refuses to lead a rebellion. He submits to arrest without a fight. And within 72 hours, all of them, the Romans, the Sadducees, the Zealots, and the crowd, will want him dead. The Romans didn't use the cross just to kill you. They used the cross to make sure every single one of those 500,000 people in Jerusalem was too terrified to blink. Crucifixion was not an execution. It was a billboard, a public announcement written in blood and agony. The Romans did not hide it on a quiet hill outside the city where only a few witnesses would see it. They placed it on the busiest public highway they could find, in the most visible location possible, to maximize the number of people who would be forced to walk past it. Just outside the gates of Jerusalem, along the main road leading into the city from the west, is a place called Golgotha, the place of the skull. Some scholars suggest the name comes from the shape of the rock formation, which may have resembled a skull when viewed from a distance. Others suggest it comes from the fact that this was a regular execution site, and skulls were often left lying in the dirt as a warning. Either way, this location sits at a major intersection where thousands of Passover pilgrims are walking every single hour, streaming into the city from Joppa, from Caesarea, from the coastal roads. And that is exactly why the Romans chose it, because crucifixion is not about killing one man efficiently. It is about terrorizing an entire population. The message is brutally simple. This is what happens when you defy Rome. Look at him. Hear him gasping for breath. Smell the blood dripping into the dirt. Watch him suffer. And remember, because if you step out of line, you will be next. The archaeological evidence for how this was done is brutal and precise. In 1968, Israeli archaeologists excavating a first-century Jewish tomb at Givat ha-Mivtar, just north of Jerusalem, discovered the skeletal remains of a man who had been crucified. His name, according to the Aramaic inscription on the bone box that held his remains, was Yehohanan ben Hagkol. He was probably in his mid-20s when he died, and still lodged in his right heel bone was a 7-inch iron nail. The nail had been driven through the side of the heel, between the calcaneus bone and the Achilles tendon, pinning both feet to the vertical post of the cross. The wood had decayed over the centuries, but the nail remained, rusted and bent, locked in place by the bone that had calcified around it. The angle of the nail suggests that his knees were bent and his legs were twisted to one side. This was not an accident. It was engineered, because the position of the body determines how long the victim will take to die. And the Romans wanted maximum suffering for maximum public impact. And here is where most people get the picture completely wrong. You have been trained by centuries of religious artwork to imagine Jesus high up on a cross, 10 or 15 feet in the air, far removed from the crowd below. Renaissance paintings show him elevated above the masses, isolated in a kind of tragic nobility. But that is not what happened. That is not how the Romans crucified people. The Romans crucified people at eye level. The victim's feet were usually only 12 to 24 inches off the dirt, low enough that you could walk right up to the cross without even looking up, low enough that you could look the dying man directly in the eyes, low enough that you could hear every ragged, gasping breath, low enough that you could smell the blood running down the wood and pooling in the dirt below. And that was the entire point. The Romans wanted you close. They wanted you to see the mechanism of death in excruciating, horrifying detail. They wanted you to understand exactly what was happening to this person and exactly why it was happening. Because crucifixion kills slowly. It kills through suffocation, and the process is designed to be as visible and as agonizing as possible. Here's how it works. When a person is nailed to a cross with their arms extended and their body hanging from the wrists, the weight of the torso pulls down on the chest cavity. The diaphragm, the muscle responsible for breathing, is stretched and compressed. The victim cannot fully exhale. Carbon dioxide begins to build up in the blood. The body goes into respiratory distress. Panic sets in. So the victim pushes up on his feet, using the nail driven through his heels as a pivot point, lifting his body just high enough to take one full breath. But the pain is excruciating. The nail grinds against the shattered bone. The legs are already weakened from the scourging and the beating. So after a few seconds, the legs give out, and the body collapses back down. The chest compresses again. The suffocation returns, and the cycle begins again. Push up, gasp, collapse. Push up, gasp, collapse. Over and over and over. This cycle can last for hours, sometimes for days. The Romans would sometimes break the legs of the crucified to speed up the process, because once the legs are broken, the victim can no longer push himself up to breathe. Suffocation comes quickly after that, usually within minutes. But if the Romans wanted to make an example, if they wanted the execution to serve as a long, drawn-out public deterrent, they would leave the legs intact and let the man hang there, gasping and struggling, for as long as his body could endure. And the whole time, the crowd walks past. Pilgrims on their way to the temple for the evening sacrifice. Merchants hauling goods into the city for the Passover markets. Roman soldiers on patrol. Women carrying water jars. Children playing in the dirt near the road. All of them forced to walk within a few feet of the dying. The Romans made absolutely sure that no one in Jerusalem could avoid seeing the cost of rebellion. So when Jesus is nailed to the cross at Golgotha on Friday morning, he is not isolated on a distant hill surrounded by a small group of mourners. He is pinned to a wooden post at eye level on the side of the busiest road leading into the city. The crowds are walking within inches of him, close enough to spit on him, close enough to mock him, close enough to see the iron nails driven through his wrists and heels, close enough to see the blood running down his arms and legs, close enough to hear him struggling to breathe. And that proximity, that forced intimacy with death, is what makes the mockery so brutal and so personal. Because the people who walk past that cross are not abstract villains from a Sunday school story. They are real human beings. Many of them are Jewish pilgrims who came to Jerusalem to celebrate Passover, to worship the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And now they are standing 12 inches away from a dying man, a fellow Jew, and they are laughing. Some of them are shouting insults. Some of them are quoting his own words back to him in mockery. Some of them are placing bets with the Roman soldiers on how long he will last before he dies. The Gospel accounts record the exact words. They say, "He saved others, but he can't save himself." They say, "If you are the King of the Jews, come down from the cross, and we will believe you." They say, "He trusted in God. Let God deliver him now if he wants him." And Jesus, pinned at eye level, blood running down his face from the crown of thorns pressed into his skull, struggling to push himself up on shattered heels just to take one more breath, hears every single word. For 3 hours, the crowd continues. The insults, the mockery, the taunts. The Roman soldiers sit at the base of the cross and gamble for his clothes, rolling dice in the dirt, while the man above them slowly suffocates. The religious leaders, the chief priests, and the scribes and the elders stand at a distance with their arms crossed, watching with cold satisfaction. The pilgrims stream past on their way to the temple, glancing up at the cross for a moment before moving on with their day. This is just another crucifixion, just another criminal being executed by Rome, just another day in occupied Jerusalem. And then, at noon, everything stops. The sky turns black, not cloudy, not dim, not overcast, black, as if someone has pulled a heavy curtain across the sun and snuffed out every source of light in the sky. The temperature drops. The wind dies. The noise of the crowd begins to fade as people stop walking and look up in confusion and growing fear. And the darkness does not lift. It stays, thick, oppressive, unnatural. For 3 hours, from noon until 3 in the afternoon, the city of Jerusalem is plunged into a darkness so complete that even the battle-hardened Roman soldiers guarding the cross begin to panic. This is not a metaphor. This is not symbolic language inserted by later editors to add drama to the story. The Gospel writers record it as a concrete, observable, historical event. Matthew, Mark, and Luke all describe the same phenomenon in nearly identical terms. Darkness covered the land from the 6th hour until the 9th hour. The 6th hour in Jewish timekeeping is noon. The 9th hour is 3 in the afternoon, 3 hours of midday blackout, and no one in the city can explain it. Some later writers, centuries after the event, will try to rationalize it. Perhaps it was a solar eclipse, they suggest. But a solar eclipse during Passover is astronomically impossible. Passover occurs during a full moon, when the moon is on the opposite side of the earth from the sun. Solar eclipses only happen during a new moon, when the moon passes directly between the earth and the sun. The timing doesn't work. Others suggest it could have been a massive dust storm or a thick cloud of volcanic ash. But dust storms do not create pitch-black darkness in the middle of the day for 3 consecutive hours. This is something else, something the natural world cannot account for. But now, in the middle of Passover, in the middle of the afternoon sacrifice, while the city is locked in supernatural darkness, the veil begins to tear. Not from the bottom, as if human hands were pulling it apart. From the top, the massive curtain rips straight down the middle, from the highest point all the way to the floor, from top to bottom, exposing the Holy of Holies to open air. The priests inside the temple are paralyzed with fear. For generations, the veil has protected them from the raw, unmediated presence of God. It has stood as a reminder that sinful humans cannot approach a holy God without blood, without sacrifice, without a mediator. But now the barrier is gone, torn open, and no human hand did it. The ripping came from above, not below. This is not vandalism. This is not an accident. This is God Himself tearing open the boundary. Back at Golgotha, the ground begins to shake. Not a small tremor, an earthquake. The rocks beneath the cross split open with sharp cracking sounds. The earth groans and shifts. Dust rises from the fractured ground. And standing at the foot of the cross, covered in blood and dust, is a Roman centurion. This is not a minor soldier. A centurion is a professional military officer, responsible for commanding 80 to 100 men. He has likely been in the Roman army for 15 or 20 years. He has fought in battles across the empire. He has seen men die in every imaginable way. He has probably supervised dozens, maybe hundreds, of crucifixions. He is trained to feel nothing, trained to see execution as routine administrative work. But now, standing in pitch-black darkness, feeling the ground shake beneath his feet, watching the sky behave in ways that defy every natural explanation, he looks up at the man on the cross. And for the first time in his hardened, blood-soaked military career, he is afraid. Not afraid of rebellion, not afraid of insurrection, not afraid of political unrest or military defeat. He is afraid of God. And in that moment, he says 5 words that will echo through history. Truly, this was the Son of God. The city of Jerusalem in 33 AD was not a quiet, reverent gathering of believers mourning the death of a gentle rabbi. It was a violent, overcrowded, blood-soaked war zone balanced on the edge of total collapse. Over 500,000 people crammed into a city built for 80,000. Roman soldiers stationed on rooftops with spears, scanning the crowd for rebels. Zealot assassins moving through the streets with hidden daggers, stabbing collaborators in broad daylight. Corrupt high priests running a billion-dollar extortion racket inside a temple literally running with the blood of 250,000 slaughtered animals. And in the middle of it all, one man, nailed to a cross at eye level on the side of a public road, mocked by the crowds who walked within inches of his bleeding body, abandoned by his disciples, suffocating to death in front of 500,000 witnesses who had no idea they were watching the creator of the universe die at the hands of his own creation. But when he died, the sun went dark. The ground split open. The veil in the temple tore in half from top to bottom, and a Roman centurion, a professional killer who had spent his entire career executing enemies of the state, stood in the pitch-black ruins of a shaking city, looked up at a Jewish carpenter from Galilee, and declared him the Son of God. That is what life in Jerusalem was really like.